Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming today.
No problem at all.
Lovely. Okay, I think we've got all our speakers in the room now. I've been telling everyone else we're going to get to 5 past, and then we'll start the meeting just to get everyone a couple of minutes if anyone's running late to actually join the meeting. Yeah, so 2 more minutes, and then we're gonna get started. Okay, Hassan, do you think it's now 5 past? Should we just get started, and then people will just come into the meeting on their own time if anyone's still late?
Yep, I think yeah, we should get started.
Yeah, just get going.
Right. So I just want to thank all the attendees for coming. Thank you everyone for showing up. And so my name is Hassan Fawaz, President of War Study Society, and with me is Emily Myson, and so she is part of the International Relations Society Committee, and we'll both be the moderators for today's event. And so we're going to start with some opening statements, and then move on to the structured discussion, and then we'll be accepting questions from the audience. I also wanted to thank the speakers for coming. Thank you all. Hopefully we haven't been a bother. And yeah, so let me just quickly introduce Thomas. So Thomas is a cybersecurity consultant at Accenture iDefense, and he was previously at King. And then we've got also Arzu with us, who is a political and security risk analyst at CRH, and has had previous experience at PwC and the International Rescue Committee.
Yeah, and we've also got Anna Costas with us today. She's a managing director at FTI, and she works in financial crime regulation, so also very interesting. Yes, we're very happy today. We've got quite a good range of speakers in different sectors. So as Hassan said, we thought we'd start off with a bit of an opening statement from all of you three speakers. So we thought we could start off with you introducing yourselves. Especially then, we'd be interested in hearing a bit about your academic background. And I thought it'd be great if you guys could give us some insight into what your day-to-day looks like in your respective roles. I think we can tell from your job titles, obviously, that what you do is interesting and could be of interest to international relations and war study students. But I think for many of us, the actual day-to-day activities is a bit of a mystery still. It'd be great if you guys could enlighten us on that as well. Arsu, do you want to just start off by answering the question?
Okay, didn't
Lovely.
forget to unmute myself this time. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Just to jump in, as Hassan introduced me, I'm Arzu. I am the Political and Security Risk Analyst at CRH. Relatively new in this role, but I have held an analyst role in different organizations within different contexts for many years now. I have done my bachelor's degree in international relations in Turkey at Middle East Technical University, and I did my master's degree at Warwick University in the UK in international security. As to day-to-day activities and what this role entails, in every organization, the role of a political and security risk analyst will differ based on the organization's areas of interest, the areas in the world that the organization has, exposure, i.e., their staff, their assets, their basically investments, and so on. So. And based on the industry that an organization operates in, they will again have different priorities when it comes to risk exposure. In the current organization, which is in the construction sector, since the company that I'm working for at the moment mainly operates in North America and Europe, we are looking at well, I am at the moment looking at different kind of risks than I was looking at when I was at IRC or when I was at PwC. So just to explain a little bit in comparative, in a comparative way. At PwC, I was the Middle East political and risk security analyst. So since I was sitting in Dubai office and we were looking at our Middle East operations. What that meant is following, important regional developments. At the time, we had quite significant tensions between US and Iran that would flare up every now and then and cause regional insecurity and also cause quite a lot of concern among our employees located, throughout the Middle East. So a lot of our attention would go to various security and political developments and how they would impact the security of our staff on the ground, how that would impact the security of our offices, of our investments, as well as reputational risks. So when some of you may be aware there was a Gulf blockade against Qatar. So a lot of organizations that are international and they're based in the Middle East, they usually operate interdependently within these Gulf states. So when Qatar was kind of isolated from the rest of the Gulf states, we had a lot of operational issues as well as reputational issues as well as legal issues when it came to Qatari citizens, for example, living and working in Saudi Arabia or in the UAE and so on. So it is a very it's a role that doesn't have clear-cut tasks. Since the world is so interdependent and global, so overall the idea of the role is that you look at global development and you try to identify the impact on the organization that you're working for, on its interests, be it reputationally, be it staff, be it legally or operationally. When I was working at IRC, I was looking at mainly their Syria program. So interesting difference for this role between working for the private sector and NGO is that private sector normally has a very low risk tolerance. So they don't operate in high risk environments generally. If they do, it's normally a very small operation, and the organization is normally much further removed from risks. But when you work for non-governmental organizations, NGOs, INGOs, they operate normally in high risk environments. So the kind of risks that you identify as risks or thresholds will be different. So IRC had quite a huge exposure and presence in Syria, especially in the northern part. So in that role, I had to keep a close eye on how conflict dynamics would change, to be able to advise the organization whether they needed to remove staff from certain areas if front lines, in those conflict areas could change and thus pose risk to our people in the areas. I also needed to look at conflict dynamics and what kind of impact they would have on the humanitarian situation, because based on that, IRC would be redirecting its resources to a certain sector, to a certain area, etc. So I worked very closely with the organization to give them my forecast of how the conflict would look like, what that would mean for the operating environment, but also the humanitarian context in the years ahead. And they would take that information and basically use it to plan their programs accordingly for the next 5 to 10 years. So that was how it looked like at IRC. And at the CRH at the moment, we have much lower risk exposure, much lower risk tolerance, since we operate in the Western world. But some of the main issues, we still have some presence in Ukraine. So the Ukraine conflict is a big one to follow. The kind of things that we're looking at is, mainly the conflict would have indirect risk to this organization. So we are looking at how, the general global tensions could affect reputationally, operationally, our presence in Ukraine. Also looking at certain things like big global players like China, North Korea, how different dynamics around their presence in the world could affect the world. Environmental activism is a new area that I will be looking at, which I had never looked before. But because construction sector is a problematic one, if you will, when it comes to sustainability and needs to kind of change quite a bit to fit into the global sustainability goals. It is one of those organizations that is prone to being targeted by environmental activists and so on. So as you can see, the focus is very different. In terms of day-to-day, I find this role doesn't have a routine. A lot of the day-to-day will be governed by either a specific report that you're working on, a specific question that you have been posed to by the organization. For example, one of the things that I'm working on is prospects of Ukraine reconstruction. As this is a construction company, they would be interested in getting into the market. So we are looking at what international reconstruction efforts there are, how they are being shaped, and what kind of space that creates for building materials organizations, construction organizations, and so on. So a lot of the role will definitely be is dictated by what projects you're working on, what kind of reports you are asked to research into and write, and also global development. So if, let's say, there is a major escalation in Russia-Ukraine conflict, that will probably, depending on the level of the escalation, that will probably dominate weeks and weeks of my time, basically. I mean, those are very general, brief strokes, but I can answer more questions if you'd like. I'll leave it there. I've taken quite a lot of time, I guess.
That was great. I think that gave a really clear, at least a clearer insight in what political and security risk work would look like. Anna, do you want to go next and tell us a bit about financial crime regulation?
Absolutely. Thanks very much. So Anna Kostas, my academic background first, very briefly. I've got a bachelor's in international politics, and I've got an MA in intelligence, international security, and a PhD in war studies. So quite a few years at the department. So what do I do in my day-to-day job? So I'm a managing director in FTI's financial crime compliance practice. And my sort of key area is financial crime regulation. I started my career as a in the banking sector. So I was a compliance officer at RBS, NatWest, and then at BNP Paribas. Then I moved to another consultancy, and I've been with FTI for just over a year now. So within my role, it's really where I think consulting becomes very much a sort of relationship driven job. So I primarily advise clients on how can they respond to, for example, new regulatory developments, or how can they improve their control frameworks when it comes to preventing different financial crime typologies, so money laundering, terrorist financing, bribery, corruption. There is a sort of very close alignment to sanctions, so that's been a very sort of big topic in the industry and for us at the moment, given the sort of just fluidity as far as it comes to the sanctions sort of landscape globally. It's difficult. It's a difficult one to say. It's like, what's my day-to-day job? So I think, and you can ask me questions about maybe what I did when I first started, what I did when I was doing more kind of delivery type work, as a consulting type work. At the moment, it's sort of managing a lot of different projects, overseeing a number of different projects, a lot of business development. So sort of ensuring that you develop and maintain strong relationships with clients and stakeholders, and how do you actually do it in a nice, natural way? How do you develop those long-term relationships? I mean, it's quite funny actually that the reason that I ended up attending this session today is because one of my clients was originally invited, and then she said, "Oh, why don't you come along with me, since you've got connections to the department?" And then she couldn't make it anymore, so you've got me instead.
We're very happy to have you.
So so a lot of it is business development, and it's trying to see where you can I'm speaking such consulting talk, but where you can add value to your clients. How can you actually help them improve? And they might be there might be different types of situations and different types of help that they might need from you. So some clients might want to be on the front foot, proactively responding to some changes on the horizon, or they might just feel that they need to improve their controls infrastructure. They need help, for example, implementing a new transaction monitoring or sanctions monitoring system. Some of them want to sort of gauge where they are in the market. So that's always something that clients are super interested in. How do they compare to their peers? So they might invite us to go and do a thematic assessment, for example, of a specific element of their financial crime controls framework. Clients might be in a sort of distress situation. So they might, for example, have had a notice of a visit from an FCA or any of the other European regulators. I work quite extensively across continental Europe as well. And they need help preparing for that visit. Sometimes clients have already had a visit, and perhaps things didn't go so well, and they need help with fixing the issues that they have had identified in their business. I also do work on behalf of regulators. So for example, I might be, a sort of a so-called skilled person. So where I'm seen as an independent third-party expert that goes in on the bequest of a regulator to perform independent audit or independent assurance of perhaps some of the work that a company has done to remediate issues or to to sort of implement new types of controls within their broader framework. Expert witness work as well. So we do also work with legal firms, not just directly with financial services firms. And by financial services firms, I mean a very broad spectrum of those. So it's not just, your large tier 1 banks. It's also challenger banks, payment services providers, asset managers, gambling firms, which is a very interesting beast as well, because those clients, have a very different way in which they need to implement the framework compared to a bank. And then there are, the additional regulatory aspects to that around safer gambling or responsible gambling and safeguarding vulnerable players and people. So yeah, a lot of conference attending. If you do like writing, then again, that's where it comes in, because you are expected to put out sort of interesting thought leadership type pieces, pitches, proposals, and then oversight. So I think at the moment I'm overseeing 3 engagements. I've had a pitch yesterday. I've got a proposal due on Monday. So yeah, it's kind of a lot of things, a lot of plates you have to spin.
No, great. Thank you for that. I think that gave me a better idea of financial regulation, and it's clearly a lot broader than I think I originally
I mean, we can talk about regulation as well, but in terms of like, what do you do as a consultant in a regulatory space?
Yeah, that's the initial day today. No, great. Thank you for that. Yeah, Thomas, you want to give us your last pitch on cybersecurity?
Sure. Hi, guys. So very brief background from Copenhagen. Took a business degree at Copenhagen Business School. Moved to London, where I took an undergrad at the War Studies Department, and then a graduate degree in Science and Security, also at War Studies. Had a bunch of odd jobs throughout that process. Ran as an intern, and then Northcote as well in London, as well as Carlsberg, the brewery back in Denmark. But what I've been working with for the last 6 years is cybersecurity. The company that I worked for was bought by Accenture, so I'm now part of that massive conglomerate. But specifically, I'm working within one unit of a much sort of bigger team. But what I do is called dark web intelligence. So essentially, my day job is to go on the criminal underground or infiltrate sort of criminal forums, and this overlaps a lot, or at least occasionally, with what Anna is working with, and try to figure out who's targeting who, with what methodologies, and why are they doing it, and then take that sort of vague information, turn it into an intelligence package, and then present that in a way that makes sense to the specific client, either based on their industry or their geography, so that they could mitigate that threat. I think the best analogy, it's sort of elevated insurance, right? They pay us to make sure something doesn't happen, and if it happens, to mitigate the damage done.
I spent a lot of time in Copenhagen.
That's good.
As you can imagine, in the last couple of years, given the financial crime events in the region.
Right. Well, I guess thank you all. I think we're gonna move on to just a series of follow-up questions, regarding certain opening statements, and make it a sort of structured discussion. So the first question I have for you speakers is, what attracted you to the field you work in, and is it any different than what you first imagined? Whoever wants to start can take the floor. And
Sure, I can start. I mean, nothing attracted me. I kind of just stumbled on it. I got an internship at the end of my studies and ended up in it, like I think most people do with their first job. But the reason why I stayed is because it's a really fun industry. I mean, cyber is booming, so there's a lot of interest and money in the industry. So we don't hit a lot of brick walls when we come out and we try to sell. And then honestly, it's much more diverse than I thought. I had this very sort of antiquated idea that it was a bunch of grimy hackers, but it's super diverse, both in terms of gender balance. We're 16 girls and 16 guys on my team, so it's split even. And then also backgrounds. I mean, we have the classic sort of computer engineers and data scientists, but we also have people with, industry expertise, especially in the banking sector or in the NGO sector, but also geography. A lot of really good people come out of Iran and Israel in this space. So a lot of those people. And I mean, I actually disagree a little bit with Asu here. I think the private sector is definitely on the forefront when it comes to this, simply because we have the budget to do way more things. So we have the budget to trial something and then let it fail rather than having to go for the secure options. And that allows us to invest a lot of stuff, right? At the moment, I spent 60% of my time trying to figure out what the threats are from the metaverse. So that's just me trying to figure out how people are laundering money through that space. And that's stuff that can only really happen in the private sector because they have the budget to fail.
Yeah, you can proactively do it. I mean, I totally agree. I think in terms of, there are a lot of governmental or law enforcement initiatives where they're trying to look at it, but they're so underfunded and short of staff. I mean, even in the regulatory space, what's really interesting is that, a lot of consultancy firms are at the moment sort of supplying additional staff to the supervisory regulators in the UK because they just don't have enough people. I can also talk a little bit how I stumbled on it, and for me, it's very accidental. But if I look at it, if I kind of chart through it, it makes perfect sense to PU, but for sure it didn't at the time. So I did a security or business intelligence internship when I was still at the department. I actually found it through the department's career service. And it was at a company that was called Exclusive Analysis, which has since become part of IHS Markit. And then I did, off the back of that, one of Exclusive Analysis clients was NatWest, which I found out when I went to one of their recruitment events, looking for a corporate internship. And then, did an internship, went into a permanent role. And the internship was rotational, so I did a security stint, I did a data analytics stint, and I did financial crime. I ended up, liking financial crime the most. And then I did different roles within financial crime in-house at first. So I did what we called intelligence, financial crime intelligence unit. So that was around, identifying and trying to understand how the new threat vectors and financial crime typologies can actually affect the bank that you're working in. And that was super interesting. That also involved me being a representative of RBS NatWest at the time to the Joint Intelligence Money Laundering Task Force experts groups. So that's a specific forum where representatives from different member banks can talk and exchange, information and develop some of these sort of forward-looking thought leadership and reports as well. Then I moved into complex investigations in an investment bank. So that was more around actually sort of understanding illicit money flows and tracking how the crime was done, so to say. And then I moved into sort of full-scale advisory when I moved into consulting. So it kind of makes sense looking back at it, but for sure it was something that just happened.
Azu, do you want to hop in or?
Yeah. So in terms of what motivated me, it's not for me, I didn't know this is where I will end up when I decided to study international relations. this sector, I mean, the intelligence outside of the government institutions and, you know, MI6s and CIAs, in the NGO and private sector is still relatively a new sector and industry, if you will. It's still relatively new function that is being developed. So, so when I chose to study international relations, initially I had this romantic ideas of becoming a diplomat and, you know, having an international life and, you know, traveling around and not settling anywhere. So it was very much you know, motivated by those kind of very elusive ideals, etc. And when I graduated from international relations, I wasn't sure what I would do. And initially I kind of started in completely irrelevant, you know, jobs. Like I was a events producer at one time. I was an operations person at another time. So I started with jobs like that. And then I stumbled upon a role that was advertised as a travel security specialist. So basically someone who would study security environments in various countries and recommend, you know, corporates who are sending employees there, you know, mitigation measures based on what the security risks on the ground are. So, which was very close to, you know, what I wanted to do because I had interest in these kind of things. And so I applied for that job, and that was my very first job that had some kind of relevance to the world of international politics. And with that, I kind of discovered this whole new world of intelligence analysis outside of, you know, government institutions. Because if I had to go through my government's, you know, intelligence agencies or Ministry of Foreign Affairs and whatnot, I would have had to work for Azerbaijan, a government whose practices I don't necessarily endorse or believe in. So finding this whole different world was very interesting to me. And at the time, we're talking about 2011, 2012, about 10 years ago. At the time, it was still a function that was at its early stages, I would say. I remember when our organization was going to pitch to clients the importance of this function, you know, to outsource this function to them. There was quite a lot of awareness raising that they had to do, you know, kind of present a business case and present a pitch as to why this is important for organizations to have and to outsource this kind of intelligence. And a lot has changed since then. There is much more space in this sector, if you will. And but yeah, I started as a travel security analyst, and then kind of broadened my role more and more from then. And I'm a political security analyst now, not only focused on travel security, but also on geopolitical, you know, dynamics and so on.
No, thank you for that, everyone. I think it's nice for students that might still be a bit unsure about what they want to do, that it wasn't necessarily like clear-cut year one in university, this is what I want to do with my life. So that's quite reassuring for us, I think. Building on that though, the next question is on advice for students. Do you have any advice you could pass on to King students on how they might best prepare, or any tips for getting into your sector? Anna, do you want to start us off this time around?
Absolutely. Guys, I think, you know, just be kind of open-minded, I guess. And don't sort of feel that you have to make a decision right now, and that you know, what you choose now is definitely going to fully determine your career going forward. Like, as you can see, you can you know, you can move around, and it's also not just about going like this. It is very much like, you know, like the monkey bars. So it's not a career ladder, it's not a ladder, it's a monkey bar. So you kind of, you know, you can go up a little bit, maybe you can go sideways, then you can go up. So sort of don't also kind of come in thinking that there is a trajectory that you have to take and it's like going upwards in one direction. I mean, for me, when I moved from industry into consulting, and I had this conversation with a junior colleague recently, because they were talking about career progression, but also what comes with this, at the current time is remuneration, right? So I actually, when I was moving, banking is it's a better paid industry, especially at the, entry level or more junior levels, compared to consulting, where then it sort of evens out, I guess, especially if you, like me, went in a front office role in a bank. But it's sometimes worth to take the opportunity cost, even if it, for example, means that, you moving jobs, but you're not getting a pay increase. Maybe you just, you sort of staying the same. So like, think about what's the opportunity cost for you, like how much is an opportunity worth to you. If you can afford to do that, definitely think about it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's very interesting, especially the monkey bar analogy. I think is valid because it's not as set in stone, I think, in 2022 as it was back in the days. Thomas, do you have any advice you want to pass on?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would advise sort of practically is, if you can, align your thesis topic as closely to the first job you envision having as possible. That's what I did with both of my theses. And although, it'll never be a close or a perfect hit, it does sort of, it shows the potential employer that you're serious about this. And obviously you'll build up a knowledge base that can help you. So I would advise that. I would also say, I don't know how it is for you guys, but my class was very focused on sort of the big ticket names when they graduated. Right, in the war studies department, they were super focused on RUSI and all these kind of places, and that's fine. But there's a huge opportunity cost, right? You will most likely get in as a grunt on the floor, and then you work your way up, which can take a lot of time. Whereas if you go elsewhere, yes, you don't have the name, but you will have a lot more sort of applicable experience very early on. And also, I mean, for every job that exists out there when you're a student, there's 100 jobs you don't know exist, right? I had no idea about the 900 types of sort of niche consultancies that we do just in-house. So don't be so focused on sort of these really big names, and instead go. I mean, one of the greatest things I can tell is that you learn much faster if you go into a startup, because you have to simply just do a lot more jobs, right, in that startup than if you get in as an analyst somewhere. So think like stuff like that. And then in terms of skill, I would say if you can't get some sort of data visualization skills, you don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a data engineer or software, anything. Just get some stuff that allows you to visualize and understand big data sets, because that'll be applicable to almost any analyst role. And then be comfortable presenting. And especially in the intelligence world, most people suffer from imposter syndrome, because you are doing a job that's very much learn on the job. So just accept that's going to be there, and then learn that it actually has value, that you're able to deduct intelligence based on very limited information.
No, thank you for that. I think that's a good point. I'm not necessarily just focusing on the big brand name companies, but actually branching out. I think there's definitely lots of opportunities that we're not even aware of just yet. Arsi, do you have anything you'd like to add on?
Yes. So I agree with Thomas, by the way. Make friend with your imposter. It's going to stay with you all your life. Hopefully not that long, but anyway. So in terms of my career and the kind of people I have dealt with, and the my employers and so on. So the kind of analysts that were highly appreciated by employers based on my interactions with my colleagues are normally people who come from an international background, who have lived in different places, kind of integrated themselves into different cultures, not just traveled as a tourist, but if you can find ways of doing, let's say, being involved in a international development project somewhere, go to India for a couple of months and volunteer with WWF or whatever, find creative ways of exposing yourself to different cultures. Because that tells to the employers that you are curious, that you're adaptable, that that also helps you develop your critical thinking skills. It gives you a sense of how the world works. It broadens, your perspectives, which is quite important. So find creative ways specifically to work on your analytical and critical thinking skills. Okay, those are very, very important, especially critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills, because in this role, when you are posed a question, there are so many ways of answering it. For example, if you, at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict, a lot of people were questioning whether Russia will actually do this. Will they go for go ahead with their plans? So to answer that question, you may need to think in ways that basically what kind of factors what kind of information you need to go after, what kind of variables you need to research to identify the motivation and willingness and capability of Russian government to actually do this. So what I'm trying to say is it's a very, very fluid field, and you need to be really creative and critical when it comes to doing it. So try to expose yourself to experiences outside of your comfort zone, because that really develops parts of your brain that is just not, don't get challenged if you stay with the academic career. Okay, so that's one thing that I would recommend. Second, in terms of, so for those of you who are interested in the kind of political and security analyst risk roles that I've done, there are various different tiers to it. So you can either work as an in-house analyst in an organization, be it NGO or corporate, or you can work on the provider side of things. So the difference is provider companies, they usually hire a number of analysts who have different expertise, around the world. And these analysts provide reports, intelligence, etc., outsource this to outside organizations. So for example, one example of that is Sibylline, for example. It's a provider organization. They have a bunch of analysts, and each analyst focuses on different parts of the world. So when for example, say PwC can become their client and say, okay, we need a report on Qatar blockade, and I'm talking about past examples, and the implications on our company, or a forecast of how a conflict in Ukraine is likely to develop in the next few years. So and then the provider companies will engage one of their analysts and then provide information to the company. Or like CRH, they hired their own analyst, and the analyst in-house kind of does the research and whatnot that is more customized to the company. They would be more intimately aware of the company's interests and be more proactive when it comes to looking after its interests. And in terms of tiers, there are things like GSOC, so Security Operations Centers. These are normally entry-level positions for those who they are often open to bachelor level graduates as well. So you don't need to have done PhD or masters to enter into these areas. It's a good starting point. Normally they are shift-based, and the duties entail basically you watch developing security alerts. So say your company has a number of employees, let's say in Manila, and in the center of the city, there is a big bomb that goes off. You need to action that. You need to contact either action and escalate it to the manager, who would then contact the employees to make sure they're fine, safe, etc. Or there's a big protest coming up, let's say in, I don't know, Odessa, and you need to, you know, make sure that your employees and your staff are not caught in it, etc. So they're entry-level positions. They give you a good grounding and good view of how the role is and whether you like it or not. And from there, you can kind of broaden your scope and become more generalist analyst, or become you know, region specific and so on. What I did, and I think this was very helpful. I started at IRSOC right after my bachelor's. I did not directly go into master's. I decided to kind of see how the working world is like, see what different things I can try and where I can find myself. And based on that, I would be doing my master's and picking my specialization. I think, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of successful careers that have kind of gone from bachelor's directly to master's and then directly to PhD, and then done something completely non-academic. I'm sure there are examples like that too. The benefits of not doing that for me is that when I was doing my master's, I realized that the academic world can be a little bit of an echo chamber. So it can build theories and lose that connection with the outside world and with the practical. And so breaking it in between kind of gives you a good view of how things are in both worlds. And so when I went to do my master's after 5.5 years of work, I was able to use the academic aspects, the theory-based aspects of my master's, and then kind of join it with practical aspects that I've learned from my job. And that takes you further when you know, after I finished my master's, then I had very good writing skills. I had very good critical thinking skills. And so I could apply, you know, all those skills I developed from my master's and practical skills I developed before. And I kind of, it skyrocketed my career in terms of the kind of jobs I could land. And secondly, having a master's degree is critical in this job. It's a very, very competitive sector. And you need to find all kinds of different ways to strengthen your profile. Do courses. There are a lot of intelligence analyst training courses now. You know, go for internships. Make sure you learn new languages. Languages by far are the biggest factor that impresses employers. You know, they're like, oh, you speak 3 languages, 4 languages. That is a big win. So yeah, work on your profile. Make sure, you know, it's a competitive field. Make sure you can stand out.
Right. Well, thank you for that very great conversation. We had a question in relation to internships, but I think everyone has touched upon it very briefly. Maybe you could answer them within a question that is actually asked from the audience, because we've got 10 minutes left around that. Maybe we could go 5 minutes above. We just wanted to open up the floor to questions from the audience, and please feel free, if you want to raise your hand and ask the question, do that, and if not, then just put it in the chat, and Emily or myself will ask it for you.
Yes, we do have a question from Joshua. Are there any tecken? I'm probably completely butchering that. Courses you suggest? I'm assuming this one's meant for Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, there's There's loads, honestly, and there are free ones, cheap ones, and very expensive ones. I think sort of the diamond in the industry is the one called SANS. I'll just type that in here. They have a bunch of courses. I know they have student discounts. They're still not cheap, but if you can somehow get that swung, or you know, if you have an uncle that died and inherits some money, that's a good way to start. Otherwise, what are they called? The journalist who helped Navalny dox Putin. Bellingcat has really good OSINT courses, and they're a little bit cheaper. They're also very good. It depends a little bit on what you want to do. If you want to do sort of OSINT from a cyber threat intelligence perspective, SANS is the best in the industry. If you want to do more from a like litigation, help lawyers find dirt on their enemies type stuff, Bellingcat is the one to go to. But ping me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a complete list. I have a lot of these courses.
Yeah, there are quite like Thomas said, there are quite a lot of free courses or cheap courses on Udemy or Coursera and whatnot, which is a good start. More specialized intelligence analyst course, they're quite expensive, the ones that I have been basically exposed to, and in a lot of companies, you know, organizations would sponsor you. They have training budgets and whatnot. So but if you do just a Google search with, you know, intelligence analyst courses or OSINT courses, you'll find plenty of material online with affordable rates that you can kind of take as a starter, and then you can build on that based on your individual circumstances.
Okay, great. I can't see any other questions in the chat. I don't know. No, we do. We do have one from Celine. What are some technical skills required for current political risks? Are there any that make you stand out? So, Asu, I think if you can start this one.
Technical skills. Nothing specifically comes to mind. You need to be a good writer. I don't know if that counts as a technical skill, but when I say a good writer, style is important. So in this job, you need to be brief, concise, and to the point. You know, you need to make sure that you communicate the most important message in the briefest manner possible. So that's very important. So it's very different to academic writing, very, very different. You know, I remember when I was doing my essays and dissertation, I was like, oh my God, am I at 10,000 words yet? It's just, it's opposite to that. So that's very important. But yeah, other than that, it's mainly, I have found it's mainly, you know, soft skills. But I mean, some tech skills in relation to research. OSINT could be called a technical skill, I guess. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, you kind of need to, and also you need to learn to deal with large amounts of data without freaking out, without getting overwhelmed, and being able to kind of summarize it in relatively short amount of time. I think that, yeah, that's what I found to be. I mean, I can talk more on this if you like, but yeah, so briefly.
If I could just quickly interject here, I work a lot with our geopolitical threat intelligence team. Obviously, it's still from a cyber perspective, but I agree with Asu. Any sort of data visualization skill is good. And then I think one of the best things is just to, it's not a skill, but it's just a habit, is to keep on top of news, right? It's impossible for any intelligence analyst to always know what's going on. But one of the best things that I've found is to just slowly but steadily work your way into different kind of trust groups, be that on Slack or whatever, because then you can at least get maybe a 2 or 3 day advantage ahead of a news cycle breaking. And this just takes time. So you might as well start now before you have a job, and it's just going to be a bonus. And what I mean by these trust groups is just to, you know, if you have an interest, then just start there. A lot of this happens on Slack, some happens on Reddit, and there are some Teams channel as well. But just talk to people that are interested in your field. If you're interested in cyber, you're welcome to talk to me. And then at least you have a network when you start, and then get into the habit of just reading up on your industry. I have the same five news outlets that I read every day for my industry, because obviously things happen at different times. So when I wake up in the morning, I just read those. That's probably a healthy habit to begin with.
Okay, thanks guys. We've got one more question from City. Wondering if there's any specific timeline to apply for related internships, both to political risk and cyber. Yeah, Thomas, you just want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I mean, cyber internships are everywhere. So at any given moment you're looking, there will be one closing and another one opening. I can only speak for our company. We open 4 times a year. So if that's something you're interested in, ping me on LinkedIn. I think the next round is applications in mid-December with start in, I don't know, sometimes in February, something like that. And they're paid. So yeah, it's a paid internship.
The only internships in this role that I've come across was at IRC, but they were not paid, which has its own issues. I mean, it was an arguable position, but in terms of, I don't know to what degree the corporate sector, I mean, Thomas said his organization does it, but I have not come across corporate sector opening internships in political and risk analysis. But you can be a little bit proactive in this, you know, if you can build some connections with, you know, analysts through networking, through LinkedIn or not, and offer, you know, ask the question whether they would be, you know, they can, if some organizations could be willing to pay. In a lot of organizations, this role is very stretched. So for example, we are a huge organization and I'm the only analyst. So they can always take, you know, extra help. So they may be open to the proposals of, you know, working either for free or you know, working for certain limited amount of money. So you may want to be proactive on that, or just shadowing. Even if you can land a job where you could shadow an analyst, that would give you quite a big exposure.
Okay.
And try to attend industry conferences. A lot of these conferences are paid for, but they always have free tickets for students. Go to industry conferences, go to one of these talks and meet people. That's how I got my second internship. Yeah, so just sniff out any conference you can. Obviously, there's always some in London, so see if you can find some. The biggest conference in my industry on the European continent is happening in December. It's called Black Hat Europe, so see if you can get tickets for that one.
I can also provide you a list of intelligence providers that you guys can try to contact and see if they would be willing to, you know, open positions for internship or shadowing or that kind of stuff. I think they would be better places to start with rather than in-house analysts, because that would open the company to all kind of information security risks. But intelligence providers could be able to accommodate these kind of things.
Yeah, no, also that'd be great. I think a lot of people would appreciate that if you can send a bit of a list on possible leads. Yeah, that is also the time, unfortunately. So I think we're gonna get the meeting to an end now. Thank you again to us and Thomas for coming, and Anna as well. She had to leave a while back. And thank you to everyone for attending. I hope you will find it helpful. I found it really interesting. And yes, I hope you will have a lovely evening.
No problem. It was a pleasure. Have a good evening, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hassan.
Nah. Let's see. It's recorded.
Okay. Let's talk after.